Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Sometimes there can be things that happen in tabletop RPGs like Dungeons & Dragons that puts players at odds with each other. These can usually be cleared up by talking about it out of game, though sometimes, even out of game, things can take a turn for the worse, much like the examples in these next D&D horror stories. But first, I gotta farm them likes, so here's a video of the like and comment kitty getting a bath. Wasn't that just too cute? Who wouldn't give a like for that? But with that out of the way, let's get right into the stories. I had my data stolen by a player who wanted to know the story beforehand. By Reddit user, Fabulously Empty. Yeah, you read the title. This might be a long post, so if that's the case, I'll leave a small version at the bottom. I've been DMing for a long time, and currently I used almost exclusively digital tools to prepare my games, like D&D Beyond, Google Drive, OneNote, etc. It's just a lot more practical than pen and paper, especially if you're doing a homebrewed game. We used to play in person before the pandemic, meeting weekly. Now we play online. We're a group of 6 people, and we've been friends for almost 10 years. Thus, we have quite some trust between each other. The party members are experienced, and one of them usually acts as the self-proclaimed leader. This player in question has for the last few months been quite overbearing with the others, especially when they try to decide something. I tried to call that behavior before, but the other players never seemed to mind. However, this bugged me, especially since he constantly led them towards choices that would net them the best results. As he would say, he avoided traps, could pinpoint twists, and even was actively suspicious of NPCs that were supposed to be villains, without even me showing any hints of that. Initially, I thought I was just being a shitty DM and showing things on my face. But that changed the last 2 sessions. I had a problem with my internet connection and couldn't access my notes on Google Drive. Thus, I ended up writing the 2 sessions by pen and paper. Then, during the first sessions, his straightforward leadership was nowhere to be seen. He was jittery and very anxious through the mic. I thought he had a bad day, but in the next session, the same thing happened. But this time, he asked me how I was planning our sessions. I answered that I had planned them beforehand during my lack of internet connection, and did it on a notebook. The session went on without any issues, but I still felt strange when he asked me about that. So I decided to have a look at my notes. I didn't realize it before, but the drive in which I keep my session notes had more than just me having access to it. He gave himself access to my Google Drive, and thus could see my notes before every session. My theory is that he probably did it when we were still playing in person. Regardless, I took my laptop to an IT expert and asked him to check everything. The dude had given himself access to pretty much all of my emails and drives. It took 3 hours to be able to deny access and change all of my passwords. I even changed my bank passwords just in case. Regardless, I confronted him after that, saying what he did was absurd and was borderline criminal by the nature of it. He tried to explain himself, saying his anxiety wasn't letting him have fun when he didn't know the stories beforehand, so he thought I wouldn't mind. It ended up with him blocking me and every other friend on social media, Discord, etc., and essentially disappearing. Now, this was never something I thought would happen. Still, I do hope that that's the end of it. It sucks because I trusted him, and I really didn't think a friend could be this shitty over a damn game. TLDR, a player used my laptop to give himself access to my emails, Google Drive, and online tools, so he could know the sessions beforehand and always take the best route possible, and getting defensive and disappearing once he was confronted. Holy hell, talk about an invasion of privacy. This reminds me of something that I learned in tech school. Whenever you leave your computer unattended, always lock it. For a player to invade someone's personal privacy like that, just so he could know what happens in upcoming games, is super shitty. And I'm sorry, his excuse of having anxiety does not fly here. If tabletop RPGs are too anxiety-inducing for you to play without knowing every little detail the DM has planned, then tabletop RPGs just aren't for you. I am no legal expert, but when OP said that what this player did was borderline illegal, I'm pretty sure he could have removed the word borderline. Which this player probably realizes, since he blocked OP and all of the other players after being confronted, and hasn't been heard from since. Or he was just embarrassed, which would at least show a little bit of self-awareness. Have you ever had an experience with a player that tried to see a DM's notes? If so, how did or would you handle it after they were caught? Wandering minds would like to know. Anyway, let's move on to the next story. Don't worry, I'm an experienced DM who knows how to introduce and include new players. Right. By Reddit user DominatusXD. Recently discovered this sub, and have had a horrifying, yet fascinating, time reading through some of these before I realized I actually had something to contribute. To set the scene, I've only been playing 5e for about 4 to 5 years sporadically, and I've consumed a great deal of online sources such as CR and Acquisitions Incorporated, so I have a moderate amount of knowledge. Not enough to run my own game comfortably, but enough to sort of help brand new players at the table. A few years back, we had a weekend getaway with a few other couples, plus some friends at a beach house, and mine and my girlfriend's, now wife's, friend was bringing along her new boyfriend, and he was gonna DM a game for newbies to experience D&D. I was crazy excited to have someone help bring my wife into the fold, so we could share in this pastime. His word in the group chat, quote, "Don't worry, I'm a top-tier DM who runs multiple campaigns, and I can cater to any skill level. It'll be no worries." This was backed up by our friend emphatically. Okay, sounds good. Side note, DM and friend met during a campaign he was running. He proceeded to cheat on and then leave his wife, who was also in the campaign with them, for a friend. Super messy. Fast forward to the evening of the game. Drinks had been had and food had been cooked, so we were ready to settle in. He asked if everyone has their character sheets ready. Half the table didn't because they didn't know how. And he said, quote, "I can't believe you guys would be so unprepared. You really are new to this, huh?" So we spent the next 45 minutes building characters for everyone. Finally, we started the campaign. He's given a little backstory and started us all off in a tavern. You know, the usual shtick, and given the rough outlines of a basic intro campaign. Hunt this, kill that, explore this hidden temple, etc. Our new players at this point have been given very little to no guidance on how the game mechanics actually work, so the more experienced players would be doing most of the talking, perception and skill checks, etc., to show our new companions how things are done. Even I could see our newbies' interest was waning. At this point, DM's done nothing by way of guidance to our new players. No explanation on what the skills do, or what options are available to them in any given scenario. Or even a, quote, "You could try doing this." Nothing except snarky comments like, quote, "Well, what do you think XStat means? Come on, it's not rocket science." All the while mooning over his girlfriend's character. Turns out, she was reusing the same character from the campaign they were previously running with his now ex-wife. His favoritism became more and more blatant, passing her checks with minimal rolls. I'm seriously talking 2s and 3s. All the while, still not assisting the new players to understand what their characters were capable of. If I recall correctly, she was also the only one to get DM whispers, even when others passed perception and insight checks with natural 20s. Though, now in hindsight, I don't think I want to know what he was whispering into her ear. This all accumulated in a rather craptacular experience for the new players, being rather excluded from the game, and frustrated because there were long periods of silence as he refused to throw our new players a bone, unless of course it was his girlfriend. I could only do so much as I wasn't by any means an expert, plus I'd never even played most of the archetypes they rolled, so most of my assistance was guesswork. The damage was already done. No one except the DM's girlfriend was having any fun, and people started leaving the table. The game was a disaster, and my wife had zero interest in the game anymore. While wrapping it up, he said the words that made me mad, and also click to what he was doing. He said, quote, "Well, when I run these campaigns in the shop, my players normally do much better. I guess it's not a game everyone can be good at." The bastard was tilting the table to feed his girlfriend's ego, which in turn, she would reciprocate back to him saying, quote, "How good a DM he was." We all left them at the table to go inside, pour more drinks, and fire up some party games on the PS4. And sadly, despite me telling my wife that D&D does not equal that experience, she's had no interest since. We're also no longer friends with those pretentious asshats. Man, do I hate DMs like this. Filling up his own ego and talking down to new players like that. It can turn people that are new to tabletop RPGs away from them due to the bad experiences DMs like this provide. Plus there was a mixture of that with him playing obvious favorites with his girlfriend. Having a significant other of a DM playing a game can be fine. Hell, I play in a game where one of the player's girlfriends is the DM and everything is fair. Though there's always a chance, depending on the person, that they'll play favorites. It is sad to hear that OP's wife has been turned off of D&D due to this experience, and hopefully OP can convince her to give it another shot. Have you ever been in a game where the DM was playing favorites with another player? If so, how did you handle that situation? Be sure to let us know in the comments. Let's get on to the next story. Just some confusing decisions by Reddit user OG Skive. I'll keep this nice and short. My story is pretty mild compared to the actual horror stories on here, but it's something I still scratch my head about to this day. A few years back, while still attending college, I was invited to participate in a D&D campaign that was being hosted by a friend of a friend. I was absolutely thrilled and cleared my calendar for our first session. On the day, I showed up to where the game was being hosted in the central building on campus. I spotted my friend sitting around the table with 8 or so other people. Oh Lord, I thought, that is a lot of people. I sat down to the right of the DM, and the whole party was having a chat, waiting till everybody showed up. After waiting a while, a total of 13 players arrived. Once an absolutely unplayable amount of players were there, the DM hands out 20-page packets to everyone for us to read. I'm already considering getting up and leaving at this point, just because I feel like a burden to this group as an extra body in a big game where it seems like everybody knows each other. And I see my friend sort of has the same look in his eyes. But we stick it out as the DM reads to us all 20 pages, stopping to field questions and expand upon the lore. Finally, after sitting through the biggest lore dump of my life, it comes time to make our characters. The DM states very firmly that he doesn't want any repeat classes or races, and that he'd be going clockwise around the table to let people pick what they want. What? Why? There's 13 of us, and me and my buddy on the end aren't going to pick what we want to play. We're basically going to get the dregs of what everyone else didn't want. This was when there was only 12 D&D classes, so he added the Unearthed Arcana, Artificer, to the mix. Well, just out of politeness I guess, I stick it out. I start rolling up my Kenku Wizard that was basically handed to me. This was also before the ASI rules from Tasha's were around, and all of the races that boosted intelligence were taken. I ask if I can do point buy instead of rolling for my stats, but the DM said he prefers the randomness where some characters get to shine more than others. I rolled like crap of course, and was stuck with my unfortunate dumb wizard I didn't want. At the end of the session, we go around the table, round robin, and rattle off our backstories. Before we leave, the DM insists that we join his Discord so he can send us updates and make sure we're all around for the next session. Like, he really definitely wanted to play a game with all 13 people. I say to him that I'll have my friend send me the link when I get home, but he insists that I join the Discord right then and there. I reluctantly join the Discord and rush out of there, instantly deleting the Discord when I'm out of sight. I tell my friend that I don't see myself going forward with the group, and he agrees that he won't be going back either. I have no idea what became of the game, but hopefully they had a smoother time playing with a less engorged group of players. Wow, that was definitely a pretty big group of players. I can't even see an experienced DM being able to handle that many characters, or see how it could be fun with that many. Imagine waiting 45 minutes in battle to take your next action. I could even see a simple fight lasting hours with that many people. Then there's the fact that the DM didn't want any repeating classes or races. Kind of limits player creativity in that aspect. I don't blame OP or his friend for noping out of that situation. Though, I personally would have stuck it out for a few sessions, just out of curiosity, and to see how much of a clusterfuck it would have been. Though, that's just me. Let's move on to the final story of the day. Tabletop Ends in a Fistfight by Reddit user AccomplissedBug143. This story is from when I was in college, freshman second semester. This is important because if you think that people in this story are immature, that's because we were. So I had been in only 2 DnD games before as a player at this point, so I wanted to shoot my shot at being a DM. I hopped on the group me for our apartment and made a recruitment post. Had a group of 5 players, but only one in the story is important. I'll call him Grumpy. Grumpy came up to me and told me he was an experienced player who had been playing dozens of games before, but he didn't like that I was going to be running the campaign in 5e. He recommended Pathfinder, told me how much better and customizable it was over a series of texts filled with links to resources, but I declined. I was new, and tackling the rulebook I already looked at twice before felt overwhelming, so I wasn't confident in running anything but 5e. He seemed a bit upset about it, but ultimately decided to sign up anyway. It's session 0 and we're making our characters. There were 2 fresh new players at the table, so we took our time in slowly building out their characters. I am a heavy RPer who loves world building, so I informed everyone that the campaign would be a homebrew in terms of the plot. Grumpy then brought up a question about homebrew classes and races, which I fearfully declined. Grumpy questioned how I could make a homebrew story without homebrew characters and classes, and I didn't have a solid answer. He then laughed it off and simply told me he'd be running a min-max human hunter build, which I had no idea what it was at the time, so I kinda let it go. 6 sessions later, and I'm fed up with Grumpy. His hunter was more powerful than I thought, so I thought about increasing the difficulty of the mobs, but I didn't want to punish the other players either. He also didn't seem interested in any NPCs, never talked to anyone except for the occasional vendor to buy something. But what was worse is he was oozing with the body language of someone who obviously wasn't tuned in. Occasionally rolling his dice, even though there was nothing to roll for, looking at his phone most of the time, occasional sighs and stretches after long moments of pure silence. After one session, I got with him over text to try and brainstorm a potential side quest for his character, and he said something along the lines of "sure" and "cool" without much feedback. Now for the final session. I intended the session to be mostly RP and some skill checks, but no combat. They were in a new town, so it was time to introduce NPCs, quest givers, and restock. The session had gone on for about 3 hours at this point, and a player wanted to know the price of an item. I pulled out my book to search for an answer. Cue long wait time. Grumpy was extremely bored, so he did all of his usual things before leaning forward to grab a dice out of the big bag we had centered on the table and tossed it at me. I assumed it was to get my attention, and it missed, so I ignored it. The second one hit me in the chest, and I was peeved. So I shot him a look, which Grumpy proceeded to smile about before tossing a third at my face. I grabbed the entire bag of dice and threw it at him, sending the contents spilling on the lobby floor. After that, we were on each other, table and chairs knocked over, the classic college tussle, but with extra dice. Hard to tell which one of us was more fucked up by the end of it, but we both got a few good blows in. The players pulled us apart and we cursed at each other before the RA came in. He gave us a warning. He was a fairly nice guy, had us clean everything up, but during the cleanup, I told everyone I was officially done hosting the campaign, went on a long hiatus after that, and didn't touch D&D for like 2 years, as I thought I wasn't cut out for it. Words of wisdom: if you want to fight a player at the table, take the rulebook with you for extra bludgeoning damage. Well, OP wasn't lying when he says that everyone was immature. Getting in a fistfight over something so trivial like tossing a dice is a bit overkill. I will admit that what Grumpy did wasn't cool, but risking assault charges over it isn't the smartest move. Though, I will say the joke at the end did get a little giggle out of me. Have you ever experienced someone getting in an actual fight over D&D? If so, what caused it and how did it turn out? Let us know in the comments. If you have a story that you would like to be read in the video, feel free to @ me on Twitter or even post it to the channel subreddit. As always, I appreciate all of you and hope none of your games turn out like the ones in these stories. Until next time.